How's it going, everyone? Vince here with On to the Next podcast. This is episode 8, and I am so excited for you guys to listen to this one. This one is with my friend Erin Middleton, and she is such a wonderful person. From beginning to end, her journey is such an amazing one, and she's come a long way, and I can't wait for you guys to listen to it. This is On to the Next.
It's been a long time coming. They ain't cuffing my cloth, they tugging it. Putting up numbers, 99 pounds, and I'm still kept at 100. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. They ain't cuffing my cloth, they tugging it.
Erin, how are you tonight?
I'm doing so good, Vince. Thanks for having me. This is such an amazing opportunity. I'm really, really looking forward to our conversation today.
Oh, so am I. You're there. There are so many great people that I've met in my life, and as of recent, I've met a lot of good people. Um, Being that we go to the same church, no
Yeah.
walls. Um, when I'm actually wearing their shirt right now, the unashamed, because we are unashamed of our
Unashamed of the
belief.
gospel.
And yes,
Absolutely.
and but I've met so many great people in my life, and you happen to just be one of those great people that I
Mhm.
appreciate your story, and I've gotten a chance to hear some of the things along your journey
Yeah.
and where you've come now. And there's such an appreciation for who you are as not only a woman of God, but a businesswoman and mother. And a lot of those things so tie into just being um, just such a great person in my mind. And I want to get into all of that, and like there's so much to pack in this episode.
Yeah.
But I for one, just thank you so much for doing this, because without people like yourself, this podcast is not happening. Because you are one of the great journeys that I've discovered along the way. So I appreciate it so much.
Yeah. And let me tell you, the feeling is mutual. I love you and your family. And I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to, get a chance to meet you guys through church, but through church, get an opportunity to build a relationship, and I think your family is absolutely beautiful. I love Bree to death, and the kids are amazing. And so thank you again. I think the feeling is mutual. And that's what's been so enjoyable about this journey at No Walls is that not only do we do church together, we're doing life together, and we show up for each other, and we support one another. And you guys have been amazing in that regard. And so thank you as well, not only for today, but just for the way in which you guys have embraced me and the kids. When we moved here to Florida, it really has made a big difference for this place feeling like home.
Yeah, and before we started, we were just briefly talking, because we do have one thing in common. We both have sons named CJ,
Yes, we
and
do.
yeah, I I love your son to death. He's such a great kid.
Thank
Um,
you.
so I'm so happy for you, and that's what makes you such a great person, because I could tell by your kids, the way they live their lives, their hearts. I could tell their hearts are just in the right place.
Oh man,
Um,
Vince, I try for sure.
yeah,
I
and
try, but no, I'm blessed.
and
God's blessed me with great kids. I really am blessed. They're kids, but they've got good hearts. They're just good people. And they're very loving, and I thank God for that too. So
yeah,
I am.
and I know it's not been easy, along the way. It's and it never is. I mean, it's like if we're wanting to really fight for something, or
Yeah,
be something greater than who everybody says we could be, and what God knows we could be, it
yeah.
never seems to be easy, right?
No, no, not at all. There's so much I feel like we're so quick to limit ourselves, even before we get to like what other people may think we should and shouldn't be doing. A lot of my journey has been about not limiting myself, right? Or fighting against that desire to want to limit myself and what I am capable of. And it wasn't really until honestly like this chapter of my life that moved from Southern California to here to Florida, for work to kind of come and make home in a new place and trusting that God was going to open doors But during this season has really been about like um, removing me from a ton of distractions and familiarity with family and friends in Southern California, and really putting me in a space where I had to focus my time and my attention on building my relationship with God. And through that, really beginning to understand that He has control, and the more that I let go, the more that I surrender, the more that I don't limit Him, that He wants to do wonderful things in my life. And it hasn't come without sacrifice, but He always does it so much better than how we could ever think of, and that's really what this chapter has been in my life. It was hard, Vince. For the first 6 months, I was here alone. My kids were still in California. I had relocated, trusting, God, that this new chapter is what our family needed. And transparently, I'm a single mom, and you make sacrifices to make sure you can provide a living for your children. And I had a wonderful opportunity, through my job to come here to Florida, but it wasn't my first choice. If I would have followed myself and what felt easier for me, I would have still been in California.
Yeah.
Because it didn't make any sense to leave. My whole family is there. Why do I need to leave? And I could have still had a really great job and career with the same company in my previous role. But again, that limiting mindset, God's like, I've got so many things I want to do for you, and they can't happen here in California. And it's not really, they say hindsight is 2020. You don't understand things fully. And I think that's just how God works. He doesn't reveal the plan, but when you look back, you're like, man, like I'm so glad that I was obedient. I'm so glad that I listened. And despite the days when I cried because I didn't understand, and despite the times where it felt exhausting, to make those decisions on your own, He showed up and He was with me the entire time, guiding my steps.
Yeah.
It's just it's an overwhelming love. It's an overwhelming, the feeling can bring me to tears with how much He loves me, how much He loves you, um, and that despite sometimes my unknowingness, despite the times that maybe I don't seek Him like I should, that He doesn't give up on me and He keeps showing up, and when I
Yeah.
really sit with that, it makes me extremely emotional. The tears can just turn on because it's just so powerful, and moving. And so I just thank Him for this time to finally understand that, of
Yeah.
what it means to be in relationship with Him and to really trust, like not say it, but like really, really do it. Um, that's what this journey's been. It's been 3 years now, since I've
Yeah,
been here.
and it's
That's what the
it's a
journey's
little
been about.
it is, and it's a little frightening sometimes because especially for you. So, so that's another thing we have in common. I'm towards the West Coast originally,
That's
also
right. The
from
best coast.
Colorado. Yeah, so it's what we all say. What our all half of our other church families all from the East Coast, so it's like a
Yes, we love him
constant battle.
anyway.
Yes, we do. So, and I want to start out from there because to where you are now and to where you started out, I know there there's a sense of like like people always think I've started from here,
Mhm.
so this is who I am. This is um where I started, and this is probably where I'm going to end up finishing because
Mhm.
there's nothing outside of here. And I want you to kind of give me that, like when you grew up, like as a young Erin, what that was for you, like just growing up. Because
Yeah.
tell what city did you grow up? Because you grew up in one of
I
these
grew up in
cities.
LA. Yeah, I
Yeah.
grew up in LA. So my parents are from Belize.
Hmm.
And I am first generation born here in the United States. My mom came here. She was pregnant with me when she left Belize and came to start a life. And Belizean community was in LA. That's where my aunts were. So my mom kind of went naturally to where her siblings were, where she could make a life. And this is 80s in South Central. Like, so what you saw on the TV and in the movies is what was happening during that time. So imagine being someone not from this country with a new child trying to figure out life here. Um, my mom, I credit her a lot to, all the sacrifices that she made coming to this country. First of all, I wouldn't have been here had my mom not come to the States. I was a premature baby. I was born 2 months early. Um,
Wow.
and they wouldn't have had the resources and the machinery to keep me alive. So from birth, there's a testimony, which I really didn't get connected with until maybe just about recently, about a year and a half ago. But that's a story for another time. But my mom, was really big on making sure that with four girls, I'm the third daughter. My mom later had another child, my younger sister, and she did not want us to be exposed to the lifestyle in the neighborhoods that we lived in. So we went to Catholic school for the first few years of my educational journey because my mom was just very concerned about the public school systems just weren't great in LA at that time. And as my parents got a bit more stable, my mom has always been an educator, so school was very important to her. As they got on their feet a little bit more, she moved us out of South Central, and we moved to a suburb of LA, and that's where I went to public school for the first time, and had a community of a lot of great friends and family. When you grow up with immigrant parents who don't have a lot, they do everything together. I was just telling somebody today at work, I'm like, my cousins were my first friends. We were always together and we grew up as a very close knit family, because of resources. When your family is trying to stretch every dollar, we joke about the memories of my mom and my aunt clipping coupons and splitting groceries between two households, because they were just trying to make ends meet. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment in LA when my parents first got here, because that's what they could afford. But because my mom always placed an emphasis on the importance of education, she put herself through school. She was educated from Belize, but had to get credentialed in the education system here um, in LA and in the United States, and became a teacher. And then her career progressed. And as she was able to progress her career, she moved us, out of LA. And eventually I grew up in Corona for high school. And then I stayed there locally for college. And so my early childhood was really my mom having a sense of environments matter, and I'm raising four young women, and I have to be intentional about what type of environments my daughters are in, right? And she was strict. She didn't play. School was very important. Um, and our relationship with God and church was really important as well, too. And so she kind of gave us that foundation. And as I grew up, I grew up in a suburban area, and I was very blessed and fortunate once we moved out, and those things were great. But I always had a bit of a yearning and a desire to have a relationship with God, and um, I didn't know what that felt like as a younger kid in Catholic church. There's just different practices, and for
Mhm.
me, I could appreciate the reverence of Catholicism, but never really felt like I knew what it meant to actually be in relationship with God. And I didn't experience that really until I was in high school. And part of like our high school youth ministry, my sisters and I would go on our own, and that's where I really started to get exposure to what it meant to be in relationship, with God. And then I had a really good friend. I still have a really good friend. Her and I friends to this day. She's just been a prayer warrior throughout my life, and she has kind of modeled for me through our young adulthood of like what it meant to really, really lean on God and be in relationship with God. And I have a deep appreciation for her and how she kind of modeled that for me throughout my life. Um, but that was my childhood. It was very humble. Parents didn't have a lot. We used to share Christmas gifts. I remember one year my mom gave us a piano. It was a family gift, but that's what she could afford. But she tried, to do the best that she could with what she had, while still instilling in my sisters and I the importance of hard work, the importance of sacrifice at time, and a sense of kind of responsibility to take care of one another, which are just things that I've taken with me in different parts of my life. But we saw the hardship, and it wasn't always easy, and it didn't always look glamorous. But she had faith, and she had a relationship with God that I feel like she showed and displayed to us. And those are foundational things that, even though I didn't really understand it as a child, I saw. And now as an adult, I can reflect back and say, I understand where my mom was at that time. Now, as a woman and as a mother, I'm like, I get where she was, in that journey.
So,
But yeah,
uh,
I have, go ahead.
yeah, so, it's funny because me and my buddy Joe were talking about this couple episodes back about, the relationship with God, as far as because my dad was, he was a Catholic, kinda that's the way he was raised, and that's who he is now, and my dad, like, I honestly, I know he believes in God. He has, um, it's a different relationship. It's hard to explain unless you have
Yes.
that relationship. You know what I'm talking about. And I know, with Catholicism, there's, my dad, like, morally, one of the most moral man that I like. My grandparents handed that down to him, and just, there his moral he just had high morals, and he kind
Yeah.
of instilled that in us, and me and my sister, and, it was, it was amazing, that a relationship there was amazing. So we
Mhm.
knew God through that, but I totally understand what you're saying because when I, um, ended up having a relationship with Jesus, and I don't even wanna say it's about Christianity, it's about, like, being introduced into, just having that relationship with Jesus,
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
it's a totally different thing,
It
and
is.
unless you experience that, and people, when they do finally experience, they're like, "Now I know what you're talking about,"
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
So I totally understand what you're saying about there is a difference, and so your mom was Catholic, you're saying?
Yeah, she was very similar to kind of like you talked about. She was raised that way. My grandmother was Catholic. My grandfather, though, was Methodist. So it was different. And so again, it just depended on what views that, the parents kind of passed down. And that's, where it started. But yeah, and part of that was also too around my mom's journey of education coming to this country. That's how she was able to teach, was through the archdiocese and teaching through Catholic school to really begin her career in her teaching career here in the United States. And so that's where it was. Now she's been on her own journey, and then that's for her to tell. But that's definitely what was my initial and beginning relationships with the church and with God and with Jesus. And like I said, I think some of the things I did take away from that and appreciate. I think, like you said, your dad, very high morals, very disciplined. I think
Mhm.
in the way that it's structured, reverence, are things that kind of come to mind, which I think are all things that are still prevalent
Yes.
in how you have a relationship with Jesus and God today. But for me, it never felt personal enough.
Yeah.
And that's what I've come to learn and love and understand about how he desires to be in relationship with me, as
Yeah.
an individual. A little less ritualistic, I guess, and more about just that organic relationship with him.
Yeah. So you grew up South Central LA, and, like you said, back in the '80s, it was not nice in some of the neighborhoods,
Yeah,
as far as, like, the I guess, um, the, temperature of everything was just at a high level.
yeah. Gang
Just
culture's high, drugs high. I mean, a
yeah.
lot of violence, during that time. But again, I think my mom really worked to try to shelter us from that, and made very intentional decisions, and we didn't stay in that environment too long. My mom very quickly realized, like, hey, I can't raise my children here. I've got to find a better place. And she was able to do that. But
So
during those first
important.
early
Yeah.
years, yeah, but during those first early years, I remember seeing a lot as a kid,
Yeah.
in the neighborhood. And it was things that my sisters and I still talk about,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm
Because
grateful that I don't have to live that life, and that my children don't have to live or see those types of things, but those were rough times.
well, because people their assumptions on just areas, and parts of this country or parts of the world that you come from or live in, they're like, "Oh, you're from there," and their assumption is like, "Well, how are you if you're from there?"
Yeah,
You know? I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure you've seen some of that throughout your life, you know?
Yeah.
And people are like really because it is a testament of the way your mom was, the way she
Mhm.
kind of was a protector of saying,
Mhm.
this is just a temporary situation, this
Correct.
is, we came here to better ourselves, but in that, I'm gonna have to protect you within,
Yeah.
the place that we had to come because sometimes you have to put yourself in that situation to where,
Yeah.
like, until we could move forward in, whether it be a financial situation, whatever, then you guys are there. But I, I could just tell she did a really good job of being that protector for you guys,
She
and
did.
yeah, because
She did. I
because
think that, you don't understand it as a kid, but again, hindsight, and now being a mother with my own children, I think her all the time. I'm like, I'm glad that you had the foresight. I'm glad that, you were willing to make the financial sacrifices because uh, private school isn't free. There were public schools, and she could have very easily said, just put them in public schools. But she didn't believe that that was the right environment for us, and she wanted so much better, for us and for our daughters. My grandfather used to say all the time, every generation's supposed to get better. Um, and so he instilled that as the patriarch of the family. But I think my parents really knew and understood that when they came to this country, that they had to set the foundation. And they did so. Very humble beginnings. I tell people all the time too, like, we didn't come from any, I try to make sure my kids know that, that they
Mhm.
understand. We go back to Belize as well, too, so they can see Belize is resourcefully rich, but still considered a poor country, you know. But I want my kids to know and understand, like, we live a very blessed life, but that things don't make us who we are, and there are people that are living with far less, that still live really great, meaningful lives. So don't take for granted the ways in which God has blessed us, but also to give them a sense of like, this is where we came from, and
Yeah.
because of your grandparents, and because of the foundation that I try to set for them, that we all get to lead, you know, um, I don't want to say better lives, but improve lives, I guess, maybe by
Yeah.
Western standards,
Yes.
but they
Yeah.
get to live a better life, they get to experience life a lot differently. And I thank God for that,
Yeah, and
I
that's
thank
that's
God
an
for that.
important thing that, I guess it's a common theme of just the people that I've had on this podcast. A lot of them have had enriched lives as young people
Hmm.
because of their upbringing. And
Yeah.
even I was just talking to my buddy Carlos about it. He came over here from Mexico, and he was, his mom was like, they had nothing. And but he always says, "I feel like I lived an enriched life as a kid
Yeah.
because what the love my mother gave to me
Hmm.
and her brothers and how tight-knit their family was."
Yeah.
It's so important because I think there's a lot of people who are out there thinking, "Man, I'm failing my kids, I'm failing but if you're
Mm.
just showing those things towards your
Yeah.
kids, towards your family, that's at that moment, if you're working to get to your next point, that's what matters the most,
Yeah. Yeah,
And
life has a way of having ups and downs, and I think it's always easy to talk about things you don't have, or, you know, um, I think as parents, we all want our kids to have the best of the best. And for me, it's that balance too, between like raising grateful children, that have access to maybe more than I did, but keeping them grounded. And so our time and faith together as a family has been also a big part of this journey while being here in Florida, to make sure that we keep the first things first, that it's not about what we have, it's about who we are, and are we showing up in spaces that God has asked us to be in ways that would be pleasing to him, and I have to constantly gut check myself as a parent and as a mother, when it comes to my patience, and when it comes to how I discipline, with words and with kindness, um, and being super intentional to honor who God has called me to be as their earthly mother, but not forgetting that they're his children first, you
Yeah.
know. But it is not, let me tell you, this parenting thing is not for the faint of heart. I was just joking with my mom before I came up here. I was like, your grandson he's so like just has such a bad attitude sometimes. And I have to like not let it get to me and remind myself, like, he's a teenager. We go through these phases, you don't have to respond to him. And just pray about it. But it's hard. When I got separated from my husband, um, and even when the kids and I were making the decision to come here to Florida, first of all, we co-parent together, and he's very supportive of my career growth. Um, but it was a hard decision to move my children this far away from their dad. And it was very I know that as a mother, I can only do so much. There are certain things that a man has to teach a young man,
Hmm.
and so one of the things that I've been so grateful for, and God, like I said, always provides, is that there's men like you at No Walls. There's men like Pastor Steph. There's men like Tim who have like wrapped their arms around my boys, to be positive influence of men, of godly men, in their life. And so, um, it means more to me than you guys know, even when it's just a fist bump or a hug or like
Yeah.
a little shoulder shake on the boys,
Yeah.
that you
I,
guys love
I'm
on them the way that I do, because I know that I would want to give them the world as their mother. Um, but there's just certain things that they need to see role modeled in men. And I thank God, for so many things about No Walls and for so many things about the men of No Walls. But it means more to me than I could probably ever articulate or even express to you and to Pastor and to Tim for how much it means to me, the way that you guys love on my boys. Not that Cheyenne's also important too. You guys love on her too, but for me,
Yeah.
as a mom,
You're like,
knowing
I
that
got
there's
that
that
one.
absence. Yeah, I definitely got that one on lock. But it means a lot to me, and so I thank God for that a lot, and I continue to pray for all three of you, because you're not only impacting your household, um, you guys are impacting mine as well. So
Oh, like I said, I know I can speak for all of us. I mean, we just love your boys. I mean, it's been such a blessing to have you guys as a family at the church.
yeah,
And I, I like I said, I'm so glad to be a part of your life, to be a part of your journey, and I kind of want to go back though, to
yeah.
because you
Thank you.
your
So I can dry
thing,
up my little tears that were coming.
yeah, we're going. But yeah, so you ended up switching high schools. Your mother was like, "We're gonna move here," and ended
Yeah.
up
Oh,
going to
were you there when
public
she told her
school.
testimony?
No, I wasn't. No.
Okay.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
missed that.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, we moved in the middle of what feels like the worst time to move for a kid. Um, it was
you
actually
said,
my freshman year of high school. It was my freshman year of high school. And when you've grown up in the same neighborhood, went to elementary school with the same people, you went to junior high school with the same people, like you can't wait to get to high school with the same friends. And my mom ended up moving us probably about 45 minutes away, from where I grew up at that time. My mom had bought her first home, and she really wanted to be able to provide a home for her children. But more importantly, she moved because my grandfather lived with us at the time, and he was sick. And he was doing like taking like a medical van to get to his appointments. And there was a day when my grandfather had been standing outside in front of our apartment where we lived for over 3 hours in the rain,
mm,
waiting for this medical van to get him to his appointment. And that was kind of the fire that was lit under her, of like, hey, if my dad needs to go to his appointment, I want someone to come to my door and ring the doorbell so my dad doesn't have to wait outside. So that was her motivating factor, to move us. And of course, if kids were like, but do we all have to move? Like, do we have to go? Like, our friends are here. But that was on her heart to be able to take care of her dad, take care of my grandpa, and for him not to have to be in those types of situations. Um, And so we hated it. My sisters and I were not happy about it for like the first 6 months there at school. We were definitely bratty. We didn't talk to anybody for like the first, my sister and I, because we went to school together. We sat in the front of the campus for lunch. Like we just did not want to socialize. We made it known that we did not want to be there. Um, but as you grow and you understand things differently, it ended up being the best move for us. That place still feels like home for me today. I've got great lifelong friends that I still get to journey life with that are from that chapter in my life. And during that time, I met my first love. I started dating in high school and met this young man named Brian, who was just a really great guy, really great young man. If there's a guy that you want your daughter to have a first love with, he was that kind of guy. And so I went to every dance. I went to, because he was 2 years older than me. I went to all of his dances and I went to all of my dances. You name it, we went. Sadie Hawkins, homecoming, junior prom, senior prom, all the things. And that's the guy that I thought I was going to marry. Um, he was murdered my sophomore year of college. And you talk about the most devastating experience to go through. Um, it felt debilitating at that time in my life. Um, it felt like my whole future was taken from me
Mm,
at that time. And to have known Brian would have been to know just a very jovial, very kind hearted person. He would talk to anybody. Um, not that anybody deserves to be killed in that violent way that he was, but he definitely didn't deserve that. And so from the age of 19, I experienced what it meant to have a shattered heart, a broken heart, to lose someone that you love in that way and in that magnitude. And so his loss changed me very early. I always tell people I feel like life shook me up at a very young age, um, because to experience that type of loss was very devastating.
yeah.
Um, and he was only child. So not only just devastating for me, but for his family to lose his mom and dad, to lose their only child in a very violent way. And so I carried that with me for many, many years. The pain of the absence. Now, this happened my sophomore year of college, and it was finals week. And I remember going to my professors and asking, like, hey, is there any way I can take my finals later? And a handful of them allowed me to, and others were just like, sorry, you can take the class over. you
Mm,
know, um,
yeah.
which I took the ones later that I could because my family insisted. His mom was instrumental during my coping as well. She was like, Brian, we want you to finish school. You have to finish your schooling. He didn't play about that either. And so with whatever little strength I had at that time, I mustered up the ability to finish out the sophomore year, but it was hard, Vince. Um, it was really, really hard. And
And were you guys going to college, same college together?
no, so no, we had grew up in the same city in Bellflower, and when I moved to Corona, my freshman year of high school, he still lived there. So we did not go to college in the same place, but I had met him when I was still in high school because he lived in the apartments that we used to live in before I moved out, and he was in college at a junior college, and I was in a university not too far from where my mom had lived at the time. Um, but he drove and he would come out and drive and come see me, on a very regular basis. And this is before cell phones and before it was easy when you had to
Oh,
like put the
yeah.
work together, when
Yeah, that
people were
had to
still
be rough.
writing letters. but it was difficult. It was a tough time. And I just remember, just like I said, just feeling that devastation. Uh and I remember one time I was in the car in college at my roommate's apartment, and I remember just sitting in the car, just crying my eyes out and asking God, like, you have to help me. Like, this is too heavy to carry. Like, you have to help me. Um,
Mm,
and my family and my friends really wrapped their arms around me during that time because it felt hopeless. Um,
Yeah, I bet. I mean, just to f- especially the way you're describing him, because I mean, it's probably one of those. I don't know the situation. If you want to go into it, was it just a random? Was it somebody he knew, or
no, just random. Um, Again, South Central LA,
yeah,
he's driving home from work and from what we can gather from the investigation, um, he was driving home and we don't know if it was just wrong place, wrong time, mistaken identity as he was driving home. It happened like 5 blocks from his house. And so we just don't know. The murder went unsolved. The
mm,
LAPD had put out a reward for $25,000 about a couple months after he had passed. But this was an area, like in a 4 block radius, where there had been multiple murders, senseless violence.
yeah,
It's a very heavily gang affiliated area. Um, a lot of Black on Mexican gang activity was happening during that time as well. And so we just don't know. We still don't really know. It was never solved what happened. But the bottom line is like he wasn't involved in any of what was going on there. He was just coming home from work
yeah.
um,
It's
and just happened
so
to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah.
so sad, and it's like it even hurts me to see that you went through that, because I know, you just get to that point where in high school you're gaining that relationship with God,
Mhm. Yeah.
and now and I feel like we have these moments in life where I don't know if it's a test that God gives us to say,
Yeah.
do is at these points we could really say, I'm done with you because this is what you gave me.
Yeah.
And um I think it's really crucial that your family embraced you, his family embraced you, and it was like almost, God's hand was extended through them,
It was.
and
And it
to
was. It was nothing but God, you know. I had a friend of mine. First of all, when you're going through grief, it feels isolating already by itself, you know.
mhm,
You feel like nobody understands how I feel. This thing is happening to me. And if you allow your mind to take you to these places, you can really isolate yourself from those who are just trying to be there for you. And so um yeah, I had a friend of mine, she would call me every single day, same time every morning, and I didn't expect that from her. We were great friends, but we weren't like super close. We had just met in college, just the year before this had happened. So she's not somebody that's been in my life forever. Um, she wasn't someone who knew Brian and I's whole journey together since high school. She just met us a year before, but she loved on me in a way that I still tell her to this day. Like, I don't know if you knew that that's what I needed, but I thank God, that you did because you were so consistent. You were so consistent with the check ins, um, and so I thank God for people like her, that he placed people in my life. And again, just my family, his family, were very instrumental with making sure that I stayed on um on my path. They were very adamant, like you have to finish school. Because I wanted to give up. I was like, I don't need to, like I just we had so many plans, you know, and we were trying to do so many things the right way. Like when you get out of college, then we'll get engaged. And when like just trying to do all the things the right way. And there'd be
yeah,
become this high school sweetheart kind of love story, you know. But God had a different plan, and if there's one thing that I learned and I remember most about Brian's life, um, was his homegoing was I don't remember much. And it's funny how the mind works because you block out a lot when you're grieving and your body's just trying to cope. But I remember his service and I remember it being packed, like standing room. I mean, so many people came out to say how he had made a difference in their life and how he made them feel, you know. And we're talking about this time, he was 21 when he passed, so young, didn't live a long life, but it touched so many people. Um, whether it was just a kind word or just a check-in, or, he was just that type of guy. And I remember thinking to myself, we all have to go at some time. When it's time for us to go, what will people say about how we lived our life? And
Yeah.
we don't get to choose how long that is. For him, it was just 21 years.
Yeah,
It was
and
just 21 years.
yeah, in those times, and um, it's crazy. I was praying the other day, and because, it's there's things that I've gone through in my life, and even to now, I'm just uh, there's things that I'm still trying to like figure out my path because I'm kind of putting my faith in God right now to direct me in, certain paths right now. And God really like vividly gave me this word of um don't depend on people, depend
Mm,
on God because he'll put dependable people in your life.
amen. That's
And
beautiful.
I truly believe that because because honestly, if you depend on people, people will fail you, and I'm not saying that all
100%.
people fail, but there are people, and then you're so much more hurt because you're like, "Why did I even, put invest
Mhm.
everything that I have in this one?"
Yeah,
Because even in, it just in any relationship, because I think God places people in our lives at certain
yeah,
times in our lives, even if it may be for a long time, for a short time, that He's going to put those people. And to, in your case with Brian, it was like it was such a light in your life. It was such a
mhm,
hard time, but it was
yeah,
such a light and part of your life that you're never going to forget. Because
mhm,
that was God placing him in your life at that time was such a big part in your life,
yeah,
because there's many things that you could have, many other directions that you possibly could have gone,
absolutely.
if so,
Yeah,
I and I that it's such an amazing part of your story because I think these parts in our lives are I it's hard to say that they're that these are sometimes necessary times in our lives for
yeah,
us to grow as people,
yeah,
as individuals, as believers.
yeah,
And from that point on, um, you know, there there w- I'm sure there was a significant time of grieving, and rightfully so, because like you said, you've already made plans. You guys are like, we're doing this the right way, we're gonna
yeah,
go this direction. And that's a beautiful thing. And from that point on, it's probably I'm sure there's times, I mean, to the end of you graduating college,
mhm,
um you know at that point, what did it look like for you? And like, you're like, okay, now um I'm needing to start a new chapter in my life
yeah,
to um and it's like it's kind of like your life has been flipped upside down, and
mhm,
you're having to kind of navigate through this part of your life now. So how did it look after like that period of your life?
yeah,
You're moving on, you graduate college, and now you're moving on because now you're heading in a whole different direction now
yeah.
from what you're planned in that moment. So what was that like?
Yeah, it was tough. It was a tough time. I think the only thing that I knew is that the one thing I had that was constant was like finish school, you know,
Yeah,
finish school. And like I said, I had so many family and friends who were rallied around me, keeping me encouraged and praying for me. Um, and at that time too, I remember a season of, finding my own ways to seek God, to give me the strength and to not want to give up. But as I, got through, that was the end of my sophomore year, got through my junior year. And as I got into my senior years, when I had met my husband at the time, which I was not ready to date during that time. But I met him nonetheless, and that same friend that I told you about that called me every morning, that was her cousin,
Oh,
and that's how I met. That's how I met my husband and the father of all three of my kids, and we had bonded in grief. He had lost a lot of friends into violence, in Philadelphia where he's from. And, I was still very raw in my grief of Brian. And so we began a friendship in that way in our grief. Um, and he was kind. He was very kind. And I thank God that at that time in that chapter that he was kind and he was patient, But I went through school, and Carrie and I started to spend more time together. We dated kind of long distance for 2 years. And I was still very much so, healing from Brian's passing. Um, but it was a period of uncertainty, but also like I remember praying like, God, if you ever let me find love again, like I won't take it for granted, you know. Um, And I think at that time, I still didn't fully understand that, like, first of all, God doesn't take away from us, in that way, in the way that I think that my
yeah.
mind had thought about that loss, But I remember praying to him, like, God, if you let me find love again, you know, um, I won't take it for granted. I remember that being specifically my prayer. Um, and Yeah, we got married quick, after that, and started a family, had Cheyenne, and um, his family and my family were and his family being Brian's family as well as Carrie's family, all became a part of my journey, with Brian's mom having lost her only child. I'd always said that I would never leave her out of my life because that was kind of our bond to one another was Brian. And her and Carrie got to know each other, and they built their own relationships. And it was really a blessing and a beautiful thing, very early on in our marriage. And I began to heal myself, through the love of family and through my faith during that time. And um, we started to find our own church family together as a family as we bought our new home and family started to grow. But it was the pain of Brian leaving, the load felt a little bit lighter, but it's always there, and in different chapters of my life, I would see it and revisit it. Um, and I remember, and this is after I had been married for several years, I remember the first time I had gone back to the cemetery and it didn't feel as painful to be there. There actually was a bit of lightness in going there. And I remember thanking God, like, thank you, Father. Like, I finally felt like this grief had kind of come off of me. And I remember just thanking him and feeling joy that I could begin to celebrate the experience of knowing Brian and having him a part of my life and my journey while fully opening up myself to this next chapter that God was opening up for me with my family, and with my children and my husband at the time. Um, and I love being a wife and a mother, and so I just poured myself, into my kids and into my family life. And we had 13 great years, you know, we had 13 great years, but it definitely didn't come without the struggles of life, building a family, young couple, financial strain. Southern California is not an easy place to start a family, from a cost
Yeah, I could
perspective,
imagine.
but God provides, Vince, and I just remember feeling like God is opening so many doors for us, and having this sense of gratitude that He makes all things possible, you know. And so yeah, it was and it has been and it still is very much so a part of my journey to have experienced that type of loss so early in my life. I was 19 years old. Sometimes I look back at pictures of myself during that time and I'm like, man, like that feels like ages ago. And I understand so much more now. And I wish I could go back and tell 19-year-old Erin, like, you're going to be okay. God's got you, and He's
Yeah.
going to create for you a beautiful life. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, as we were talking in the beginning of this episode, like um your job, your journey, and the love that you've shown through, like, even your kids, because their hearts really convey what you have put out into this world, because it's just, and I think about that all the time. Is like I want my kids to convey what I've kind of brought them up as, and um just, and I know, like, sometimes kids will test you.
Oh,
But you see those moments, and you're like, it does, it brings you to tears, because you're like, man, this is, I'm so glad that I stuck out, for one, my relationship with God, and
yes,
for two, just being, trying to be a good steward of just, what your mom carried on, through high
yeah,
morals, through, um, persistence of working to where you're getting, and I kind of wanted to get to that, because you've kind of, and when I first met you, my first thoughts were, because just you as a mother, just, um just your heart was, so I could just tell you just have such a big heart. But for two, I just see you just as this intelligent woman. And I mean, and I think when I spoke on, like, when people kind of pigeonhole you as far as, this is where you came from, this is kind of who you are, even
yeah,
from where your mom came from, you know, it's like breaking those barriers sometimes are a lot harder for some people. And
absolutely,
with you, especially having your mother being the way she was, if being, this is not, we're not doing that. This is
yeah,
who, this is who we are, this is, your education is gonna be important. Your
absolutely,
morals are gonna be, there's an accountability that she brought to you
mhm,
guys. And that really conveys with you. I mean, because I could just, um I could just see it in you. And even to where now you've kind of become a corporate leader in where you are now,
yeah,
and just in that itself is such an example for your kids,
yeah,
for the people around you. And I really respect you for that. And it's very commendable. Just I And it makes me so proud to just know you as a person,
thank
because
you,
I know you work hard to do it. I know it doesn't come easy.
no,
Who you are, and that's what I appreciate even more, because who you are doesn't come easy. People think that this work and the way you are just is given, and it's not given. It takes a
yeah,
lot of work, and I appreciate that about you so much. And
yeah,
I know your journey now is, it's still, like, as with me, I'm still working through my journey.
yeah. I feel like we still got so much further to go.
Yeah,
Still so much
and
more to do.
there is, and it's like sometimes I feel like, I'm on the verge of hitting 50, and I'm like, I'm still, there's still things that people are like, well, you should have had that figured out. Well, like, I and to be honest, when I just recently retired from my corporate job
Yeah,
to pursue more of what God has led me to do, um, it it's scary, it's a risk
mhm,
taking, but I'm like,
mhm,
I need to dedicate, s- and do something that I know that I could hand down to my children, something that I could really truly hand down to them, to be and also be successful at it,
yeah,
because a lot of the stuff that I'm pursuing and doing now is what I initially went to college for, what I been doing most of my life.
isn't that amazing how
And
it comes back around full
y-
circle?
it is. And
Yeah,
I and I to be able to use what I've actually been doing most of my life, and
Yeah.
including some ministry,
Yeah.
because I've been in ministry somehow. I always talk about me when I was a kid. My mother sent me with a lunchbox with the Bible and a cross in it
I
when I
love
was in elementary school.
that.
And
That's
so
awesome.
I've been at it from a young age,
That's
Sometimes
awesome.
my path strayed away, but I
Yeah.
always knew, um, what side of the fence I belonged,
Yeah.
And, so it's and I think through your journey, it's always been the same for you also, it sounds like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
there's been times where you've, like, been tempted to jump the fence and take that other path, but you always knew that where you belong and,
Yeah.
where your path and your journey, w
Yeah.
where
I want to share a story with you. When I'll leave out the name of the organization that I currently am employed by, but I
Mhm,
work in supply chain, and I've worked in supply chain now for, man, for a while. I'm trying to think, like, how many years is that? I don't want to age myself, but it's been a while. But entry level leadership, when I first started in supply chain, and I kind of fell into supply chain, and I guess I don't say I didn't fell it. I felt like God directed my path in there because it was completely different from where I thought I was going to go after college. I got my degree in economics. I thought I wanted to get into grassroots politics, and I worked for a congressman in their district office back home in Southern California. And in my mind, that's kind of the direction that I was headed. Well, life and circumstances change, and I ended up going a completely different direction, and I landed an entry level leadership job, working in a regional distribution center. And at that time, I had no concept of what supply chain was, or what distribution was, or how goods got from a seller to a customer. I was just very good at being a consumer, right? And so I began my journey, and I thank God all the time, that He redirected my path, because what I thought I wanted, or what I thought I should have been doing, was completely different from the path that He put me on. And so I spent time at my first company, and then I moved on to another. And then after several years of entry level leadership and growing a family and so forth, I decided that I was looking to do something where I can grow, a company where I can plant my feet and where I can grow. And I remember just praying to God, like, hey, this isn't working what I've been currently doing. Like, help me find what that next right thing is. And I started working for the organization that I work for now. And I was entry level leader, frontline leadership, making decent money, but not the most money in the world. And I remember there was a day that there was an older gentleman who was coming to deliver a load to the site. And at that time, our building hadn't opened up yet. We were a brand new facility. It hadn't launched yet. So we were just bringing in a bunch of non inventory into the building. And this older Black gentleman came to me. He showed me his paperwork, his bill of lading, and the load he was dropping off. And we just had a brief conversation. How you doing today, sir? What are you here to do? And he showed me his paperwork. Let me tell you which doctor you need to go to. And he's on about his way. And well, the next day he came back with his load, and I met him on the dock again. And the first thing he told me, he said, "Sister, I see the love of God in your eyes." He said, "And God has sent me this morning with a message for you." And he said, "Where he has you is not where he wants you to be." And he said, "All of this can be yours." And he did like this, like, all of this. He's like kind of motioning, oops, excuse me, he's motioning around the entire warehouse, right? This is a 1.2 million square foot facility. He's like, all of this. He said, "Do you understand what I'm telling you? All of this can be yours." He said, "But God is just waiting for you to ask." And at that time, someone else had walked up to us. One of my managers had walked up to us to ask me to do another task. And so he went about his way to drop off his load. And as soon as I finished talking to my manager, I ran out to the yard, to try to catch this man before he leaves in his truck. And I saw him after he dropped off his load. He's coming back down the yard. And I'm standing there waiting. And I told him, I said, "I want to thank you for being obedient and for sharing with me what God told you to share with me." I said, "Because you could have not said anything, but you did." And I said, "And I want you to know that I receive it. I receive it." And he said, "Can I pray with you?" And you know me, Vince, I'm 5 foot nothing, right? And he's in his big pickup truck, and I put my hands up to him, and he puts his hand outside of his truck, and
at your
right there in
tippy
the
toes.
yard. Yeah, yeah, pretty much, and right there in the yard, um, he prayed for me on that
Wow.
day. And when I tell you that, and I don't mean this on any shape or form to be about me, this is God and glory be to God. Every opportunity since that time, I've been asked if I was interested in those opportunities for growth and promotion throughout my career. Now I work really hard, and
Yeah.
I don't want to give I don't want to give a false perception that, things just fall into your lap. Like you got to work. Faith without works is dead, right? Like you got to do the
Yes.
work. And so I've always worked to excel at my job, kind of going back to what you talked about earlier with the discipline from my mom and the work ethic and, being your best at what you do. But when I tell you, God continues to show me, and I go back to that conversation with that man back in that was 2015, so many
Wow.
times. And there were a handful of my coworkers that I shared that story with on that day that it happened. And they are still my friends today. And they're like, you remember what that man told you? I've been trying to find him, Vince. I hope he sees his podcast. I've been trying to find him to thank him and let him know that like what God said is coming true and is coming to fruition. And so for me, I know that I have a responsibility to do his work, even in my place of employment. I know
Yeah.
that I have a responsibility to show up in a way that shows his light, in a way where people can see him through how they interact with me. And even before I even interact with them, people see you from a distance and they recognize you, and they are assessing who you are, and especially in leadership, right? Like there's a lot of people that I have responsibility for, and I thank God for the privilege to lead a very large group of people and have influence in that way. Um, but people are paying attention, and so am I going to show up the way that he's called me to, and for me, that is very important to me. And I don't want to miss the mark. I don't want to miss the mark of showing up the way that he expects me to. And so, in every encounter, I give him the glory and I thank him and I share my testimony about my love for God, with people. And I've had leaders that come up to me, they're like, you just talk about God openly like that? Like, yeah, I do. You
Yeah.
know, I do. And
Well,
I get that for some people it's uncomfortable in a corporate setting, but I can't unashamed, like your shirt says that we have, I'm not going to hide because I need people to know, and I need other believers that operate in the same space or even non-believers that are seeking the relationship with God to know that he is my source. And while I love the company that I work for, I'm not confused about where this opportunity come from and who provides for me. And so I honor him. I work to honor him. I fall short. I'm human. I'm not perfect, but I really do my best to try to make sure that I show up in these spaces in a way that's honoring and pleasing to him. And
yeah.
I thank
Well,
him.
it's true to testament because I mean, if your light shines as bright as when we just see you, I mean, I know that you're a vessel everywhere you go,
Thank you,
and
Vince.
so appreciated, and that's why we love you so much.
I love you guys too. You guys are amazing. And thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for being an example of, living out your faith out loud, and being unashamed, of the gospel and having the courage and the faith in God that He will take care. As long as you do His work, He'll do the things that He needs to do for you to take care of you, and I'm really excited for you in this chapter.
Yeah, because it's even starting this podcast. I my intentions aren't like I am not a I what I've seen in the past. I'm not a Bible thumping preacher.
Yeah,
That's not like me. But I'm not gonna be ashamed of where I've came from, who I am, and what makes me who I am.
yeah,
I'm just not gonna be ashamed of it.
yeah.
If people ask what's your spiritual walk like, well, it's through Jesus Christ. That's where my spiritual walk leads through.
Amen.
And
Amen.
and a lot of people, I have friends who have chosen to take different spiritual journeys,
Yeah,
and that's their choice. But if I'm going to be a vessel to anybody, in my life. I want to show them, especially even if it's by this
Yeah.
podcast. If
Yeah.
we always say as believers, if just one, you know,
Yeah.
one of the 99, like Jesus said, I if there's just one, then I've done plenty of my job
Yeah.
for Jesus.
Yeah.
So
I think that there's an authenticity about you that people will appreciate. I think there's so many people that are navigating through this world with false pretense for what it means to be a believer or be a disciple of Christ or be a follower of Christ because of just the displays that people put on. Meanwhile, we're just looking for real connection and real relationship, which is the same thing
go
that God desires. And so I think it's beautiful that you do it in the most authentic way that is true to your testimony. And there's a reason why He's called you to do it. There's a reason why He's called you to do it. So I
yeah,
think
and
keep doing what you're doing, in a way
I
that's true to you because it's going to resonate with so many people.
I appreciate your encouragement, and it's true that people right now more than ever, they just want to see authenticity through
Mm,
through everything,
yeah,
and especially it's because we do have faults as people, and that's
absolutely.
why I honestly believe that God gave me that word about not depending on people, but depending on Him
Mhm,
to send
mhm,
dependable people. I mean,
mm.
that hit me so hard because there's
Yeah,
a lot of dependable people that God has put in my life that
yeah,
I thank every day for.
yeah,
I'm on this journey of like I'm trying to get the gym every single day now, and on the way to the gym, I throw on like whether it be worship music or just silence sometimes, just praying,
mhm,
because and thanking God on the way to the
yeah.
gym for all
My
these
car
people
time with
that
him is real. Yeah, that's
yeah,
my car time with him on the ride in, you
yeah,
know, between like
it's
you said, and there are some mornings too where you're like, just turn everything off, Lord. I just want to be quiet with you.
yeah,
I get that. I get that. When you said you know, depend on him to bring you dependable people, something that came to mind, was he wants us to put him first in everything. And so you have to go to him first to get to
mhm,
those dependable people.
yeah,
And I think that it's just that reminder of just the order in which he wants us to do things. He says, seek me first, seek ye first in all things,
yeah,
you know. That's one thing I
yeah,
always challenge myself on, like all things. He didn't say some things, he didn't say the big things, and the things that you think are important, like he said, all things.
yeah, and like I said, I've tried on my own, like, too many times and taking the
I
taking
don't have
the
a desire it's so
oh,
freeing.
it's
It's
taking
so
the
freeing.
stumbling
Oh my
down
god.
the
I'm like,
hill.
"Lord, I don't even want I don't want I say all the time too, like, I don't wanna take one step
No,
unless you
it's
told me that I'm supposed to." Like,
and
I'm
then
done trying to do this thing on my own, Lord. Like, I don't. I wanna
yeah,
submit fully to you and to your will for my life. Um, and there's so much when you can get to a place of, like, full surrender and, um it's just there's some freedom there, and I think I'm finally understanding what they mean when they say that, what for freedom, just
yeah, and
really
I
surrendering to him.
I I like I said, I thank God for people like you who've been placed in my life and our family's life, and what you've brought, and everything that this podcast is about. You're definitely a person that I thank God that's put in my life for this purpose also. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you, Erin,
Feeling is
and
mutual.
yeah, and we'll talk soon
Yes,
because
we
I
will,
have the
Vince.
I have
Thank
the
you
pleasure
for it.
of going to church with you, and
Yes.
so we will we will talk soon, and I thank you
We'll
so
talk
much,
soon.
Erin.
Thank you, Vince. Have a wonderful evening and give my love to the family.
I will. We'll see you,
Alrighty.
Erin.
Play, 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 play.